an interview for you today with a young adult middle grade fiction writer. She's written two books, and hopefully, this will give you just a little bit of an encouragement if you're just starting the process and what that looks like. And yeah, I hope you enjoy that. And here you go. All right. Well, welcome. I am so excited. This is the first interview I've ever done, and I have such a treat for everybody. This is Joy Holiday. She's a middle grade young adult fiction writer. And since that is not my wheelhouse, I do picture books and just really enjoy that. I needed to bring somebody else on to hopefully encourage you and give you some tips along the way. So that's that's where we're going. So welcome, Joy.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so we met, Joy and I met at a like an author conference. Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had tables right next to each other, and I just knew from the moment that I met her, I was like, oh, she is just such a light. She is just such a sweet spirit and everything. You could tell that she loved writing, and it just for some reason the Lord just kept bringing her to my heart, and I was like, I've got to connect with this girl. So, and then got her book and passed that along to family and friends, and so it's just been a good journey. So, but I will hand it over to you. I'll stop talking so much. So Joy, tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what did you enjoy reading when you were younger?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I grew up in Tennessee. I've lived here my whole life. I was homeschooled I'm actually a triplet. So both my brother, my sister, and I were all homeschooled together, like a little mini
Oh,
classroom. Yeah, so that was a really good experience. And it also gave a lot of time for reading. Like our mom really encouraged us to read. Yeah, I think I loved reading since like kindergarten when like we learned to read, I was hooked. Um, and I think my favorite was growing up, our parents read us the Chronicles of Narnia. So that was a really big influence, yes. And it was really special to read it aloud together as a family. Then after that, I got into like the Boxcar Children. That was like my my jam growing up.
yes.
And yeah, so just there were so many different books, but those were like two of the series that got me really loving reading.
Yeah.
And I've
Now,
come back to different series, but
right, right. Well, from the beginning, then, did you just always love writing, or did you struggle with writing, or did you know you wanted to write a book one day? How
yeah,
did that come about?
that's a good question. I was thinking about that, and I think one of the things that we did in homeschool was our mom encouraged us to make little picture books just with like staples and um, like ruled paper and stuff. So that was, I always loved the idea of writing a book from that. Most of the time, I just drew the cover and made the content section, and I never wrote anything,
Yes.
um, but it
Yes.
felt so fun. I
Yes.
think like the first time I was like, I really want to write was American Girls, like the book series. We got the magazine, I think, for just a short period of time, and they had a writing contest. And that's when I decided I'm like, I'm gonna try to write. And I didn't even enter the story, but
Oh,
um, I
but that
started writing from then.
sparked
Which
that.
is, yeah, it was definitely a God thing because I didn't even enter, like nothing came of it except I just got really excited.
Okay. That's exciting though. Okay. So you said Boxcar Children and Chronicles of Narnia. So those were the types of authors as you grew up that kind of
Mhm.
inspired you to write then?
I think so. Yeah, that and as I grew older, there's a Christian author for girls named Nancy Rue. She's
Oh
not yeah, I didn't know she's not as popular as she used to be, but I was obsessed. I read every book I could find from her.
yeah.
So she really influenced my style and she also writes for adults. So these past couple of years I've started reading her other books and that's influenced my current writing style.
Really?
So
Okay.
Nancy Rue was like my
Yeah.
teenage
Sure.
um book series that I would read.
Let me see if I can share my screen. I just want to show everybody you have a couple of your books, and maybe I'll let you, yeah, maybe I'll let you first just talk about what the books are about. You have two now. Was that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I know you're going to have more because these were great. Your first book though was The Drive, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And can you tell us? I'm going to click on this. This is her Amazon listing for the drive. And just tell us a little bit about this and what made you want to write this book. It was your very first one. Yeah, I'll just let you.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of fun to think about it because it feels like so long ago when I first had the idea, but
Mm,
basically it's just about this little boy who he gets sent a key in the mail and it opens up a door in his attic, which leads to this magical world. But the main theme is that he has like these really close friendships, and by the end of the book, life begins to change, and he has to learn about
mm,
like how to handle changing relationships and things changing in his life.
yeah.
Um, and at the same time, he's also kind of exploring what the world means, and it's an allegory for like
Mm,
the life that God has for us.
yes.
So there was a lot going on, but I wrote it while I was at college, and I had just been through a season of life where I had to say goodbye to a lot of friends
Mm,
who were moving on to different chapters.
yeah.
Um, so I actually started writing the book, um, wondering how I was going to deal with that and what it was like to lose friends.
Oh,
And so I feel like God kind of answered that
yeah.
question of ultimately like knowing that my friends who love Jesus, like our relationship will continue in heaven even if I don't. In this case, I didn't really have a lot of opportunity to continue our friendship
Mm,
because they live so far away. But it
hmm.
was really cool how God kind of answered that question, and it was very personal.
Yeah.
Um, but it
Well,
was kind of like in this fantasy way. But
my sister-in-law, she read the book to her little ones and her kiddos, and her one son said, "So mommy, this is like a story in a story." He had never
oh,
experienced that
yeah.
before in a book, and he so that was kind of neat for them.
Yeah.
Dear Lucy, and this one takes on a completely, I'd say, a different tone.
Yes, I think definitely. This one was a little bit harder to write because it was even
Mm,
more personal and the topics about especially like childhood illness and suffering.
mhm.
Um, and it's interesting, I actually wrote this one first. I didn't publish it until much later.
Oh,
I wrote this during the pandemic, and I had a family member going through um, cancer treatments. And so at the time, we moved out of state to get to a really good hospital. And that kind
mm,
of mirrors the main character's experience. They move for the main character's sister to have a really um, good experience at the hospital.
mm.
But at the time that all this was happening in my life, I learned about Lucy Barfield, who the whole story is inspired by.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, she was just so interesting. She was the little girl that C.S. Lewis dedicated The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to.
Mm,
Um, and as I started reading about her biography, she went through a lot of really hard health trials and hardships and
mm,
suffering. But as a Christian, she had a really unique response to it. And also, as someone who loved Narnia herself,
mm.
she kind of looked at her suffering through the lens of Narnia.
Yeah.
Um, but what I liked most about her story was that kids would write her in real life and they thought that she was Lucy Pevensey from the books. So they'd write her letters asking her questions about Narnia.
Oh,
Uh,
funny. That's
and that's,
great.
yeah,
That
so I thought like just a really interesting, she had a very interesting life that mirrored so much of the values of Narnia and of C.S. Lewis.
so when you write these books, do you have a process that you go about doing it? Are you like me and I'm writing scraps on a napkin here and there of ideas and then or are you a lot more organized?
No, I feel like the napkin thing is like a sign of genius. It means that you're like drawing inspiration from everywhere.
Oh,
But
thank you.
I think for me, it's a lot of it like happened in my head, so I was like really disorganized. So I just had like characters in my head and I would pull up like 1,000 web tabs on my computer because I was like researching stuff.
Yes.
And really bad about writing it down. So I'm not even at the napkin stage. I'm like, it's all in my head.
That's good.
Um, so I think both stories probably began with like the first chapter. I just was excited about an idea and I had no idea where it was going to go. And then after that, I would make an outline, but the outline would change like all the time.
Mhm.
And it was more of like one sentence per chapter of what I wanted it to be. And it would only go out like 3 chapters ahead.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, for Dear Lucy, the ending of the story was different when I first wrote it.
Huh.
And so it got completely changed in the second version, once I received feedback from some people. So it definitely like morphed and changed. The same actually with The Drive, the ending was going to be very different. Uh,
Okay.
so
Well,
I'm very disorganized.
oh,
But
that's okay. I love that you actually said, it changed with feedback.
Mhm.
And I think
Right,
kids, that's one thing that we need to all realize when we give our work to other people and they read it, we have to not be so hurt by any feedback
right.
that they give us. They
Mhm.
love us, they want to help us improve and not be so tied to how that story should go or the ending should go,
Right.
and just
Mhm.
allow yourself to branch out. And I think if you can do that, that's where the magic kind of
Right.
happens with your
Yeah,
stories.
yeah,
Um,
that's a really good
so
point.
you did give it to beta readers, then you gave it to friends or family to kind of,
Mhm.
okay, good.
Yes, yes. And it was really scary because I'd never done that before besides just when I was younger and I had like my little, you know, homeschool project
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this was it was really scary, but at the same time, like you said, the people I gave it to were people I trusted would be nice about it, even if they were very honest.
Yes.
Um, and like one example was someone who was really into C.S. Lewis. I gave him the book. He was a professor actually at my school. And so he gave some really good feedback, not only about like some of the accuracy, but also about just as a reader, he thought it was too complicated. So he gave me some really um, big edits to make that was really hard to follow. But once I did, I was really glad.
That's
Um,
great.
so yeah, it was really scary. But at the same time, once I was done with it, I was like, that was such a blessing because I had a hard time viewing it from
Yeah.
anything than my own perspective.
Right.
Uh,
It's so personal, right? As you're writing,
right.
it feels like such a part of you that when you do give
Mhm.
it to somebody else, you're like being so vulnerable and
Yes.
like, oh,
Mhm.
they're gonna know what's going on inside my
Right,
head.
right. It's very personal. That's a good way to put it.
Yes.
You know.
So then once you had your edits and you have your manuscript basically, what did you do from that point?
Yeah, yeah. So from that point, I actually, when I had the manuscript, I used a service like Barnes and Noble. Was
Yes.
what I first used.
Yes.
So I printed out a draft copy that wasn't
Oh,
officially published. It was just like I got a good deal because it was for personal use.
yes.
So then I got like maybe 5 copies, and I gave them to friends and family, and so they made edits within the books, and then I got them back, and um, then I had a couple more editions that were like all drafts.
Yes.
Um, but once that was finished, I looked up on the internet how to get it copyrighted. So I did online. You can go through the Library of Congress copyright office. It's really fast, and it costs a little bit of money. But once it was copyrighted,
Yeah.
I uploaded it to Barnes and Noble, and that was kind of the end of the process. Um,
I'll
but
put links then into this video for the copyright. Obviously, links for your books, of course. But that's a good point. Make sure you copyright your work.
Right. And it's really scary to try to like go ahead and do it because it's hard to make changes afterward. But I was also really happy because they send you a little certificate in the mail that's like this is your proof of copyright. So it's really
Yes,
special to kind of go through that process at the other side of it. Um,
absolutely. And then once you did that, and then you put it on Barnes and Nobles for sale,
mhm.
correct? And you could print your
Right.
own copies and do
Mhm.
different author events. So, did you do any with your first book, any kind of marketing, or how did you get the word
Mhm.
out?
Yeah, that's a good question because I'm still trying to figure that out. But
Yes.
I think for the drive, one of the biggest things was just my community at college. We had some craft fairs, and so they allowed me to include that as a craft kind of.
Great.
So a lot of people were supportive, and even people I didn't know were
Mhm.
just looking to spend some money on local crafts.
Yes.
but it was a good experience.
Right. And I think that's the whole thing with self-published authors. It's really
Mhm.
about the experience. If you're going into this
Mhm.
to make a ton of money,
Right,
you will probably most likely fail. I would hate to like say it, but you have to love just writing and
right.
story, and then it's the whole experience wrapped into that
Mhm.
that's where the real treasure is.
Mhm.
Same for us, and if I'm just speaking to homeschooled moms at this point, with children, this has been a great opportunity for my kids to write and then go to these shows. Like my daughters got to meet Joy, and that was just fun to see another author and see other books that other people have written, and then see other kids, hold their books and read their books. It really is, it's the whole experience. I mean, they're getting public speaking by doing that. um yeah, so that's been great. That's how we've really been doing any kind of marketing per se. I mean, you can get into that aspect, but it just feels like it's all consuming, and I just wanted this to be a love of learning,
Mhm.
of reading, of stories for our family. So do you see yourself one day pursuing this long term where it could be a full-time job, or is this, you want to keep it as a passion, or how do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, I really like that question because that's something I've struggled with, especially in my mind. I was like, once I publish the book I'm most passionate about, it'll explode and it'll just be
That's what we all think.
amazing. Right, exactly. And I think God's been showing me that, and like you said, a lot of it comes down to like the passion and that God does a lot of big things through like little tiny things that we think are small. So it's definitely not been like what I thought. It's not been very profitable, but I have found that I've been more happy when I've focused on the books that I felt passionate about and I felt like were from the Lord. I've started other books before that to me they were really fun and they were a good way to spend as a hobby, but when I thought about publishing them, they didn't feel right.
Yeah.
Um, so that's been something that I've been kind of learning and God's been showing me is that as much as I would like to make money from it, it's really going to be probably the biggest blessing to me and hopefully to others if I
Mhm.
focus on like writing what I'm passionate about and what I feel led to write about. And sometimes that's not very successful monetarily. Like you're not going to make a lot of money on that sometimes.
I was going to say, also thinking about the next one coming out, do you have anything else
Yeah.
in, like, do you write every day?
Mm.
That's two questions in one, but
That's a good question. I used to write every day when I was younger, especially like in high school. It was really good at like relieving stress. It was like my go-to. I have so many journals that are just filled with writing, like probably since middle school, which I think that's the best way to get started, is just to write whenever you feel inspired. It doesn't have to be, like on the fast track to being published.
yes.
Um, but now it's more intermittent, so it's every now and then. But I do find whenever I do write in this season of life, it's really relaxing.
Mm.
Um, my senior year of high school, I felt like God was kind of leading me to back away from writing because there were so many life changes and I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm really glad it sounds weird, but I'm glad I didn't write very much my senior year because there were so many like relationships that were changing and
Mm.
things were changing in my life. So it was actually a blessing not to write in
Okay.
certain periods. But
Yeah.
now I always have like a tab on my computer for a new story I'm working on. So it's fun to
Oh, that's
kind of
neat.
dive in and spend 10 minutes. And then I get writer's block and I go a week and then I come back to it.
Good.
But
That's a good tip for kids. So just having something quickly opened all the time that you can,
right.
it doesn't have to be this big drawn out thing where, okay, I have to get out all my journals. I need to sit down
Yeah.
here. I need to spend this much
Hmm.
time. It's just kind of as it comes, just a few little
Yeah.
things here and there that you can
Mhm.
maybe go back and look at even years from now and get an idea
Mhm.
for a story.
Right. Yes, and that's a great point because I have so many I started like once I learned how to type, I did a lot of it on like our home computer. I have so many documents that are just like one page with a story idea and I was so excited and then I forgot about it. But
Yeah.
it's fun to go through those and read, see how my writing's changed and
Yes.
Yeah,
And
but
not being so tied to, I have to finish this one. I started writing this story, I have to finish it. Sometimes
right,
you don't, and
definitely.
you need to just back away and start something else. And you might never come back to that story, but it doesn't mean that all was lost because you took the time to do that.
Yeah,
You-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest lessons that God's taught me about writing is I would get so passionate about a story. I'm like, this is from God. This is gonna like change the world. And I get so dramatic about it, which to
Yeah.
me it was really important and it was
Mhm.
really encouraging to me, but it probably wasn't meant to go anywhere. It was just meant to be like something that was encouraging to me at the time. I got halfway through and I'm like, this probably isn't the best thing for me to focus on.
Yeah.
But it was still such an important part of my journey as a writer and just as a person. Fun to explore new ideas, and it didn't have to end up in a book.
Right,
Um,
exactly, for sure. Sometimes it even is just a little therapeutic. What has been the most exciting moment for you as an author so far? Because
that's
I think kids also, sorry to interrupt you. I was like, I want
I know.
to, like, when you publish anything, whether it's just like you said, you started out writing just in a stapled together picture books or
Mhm.
whatnot. You're an author. When you write anything, you're an
Right.
author,
Mhm.
whether you're self-published or not at all. But even from the moment you were little up through now, like, is there one moment that kind of sticks
Mhm.
out for you that was really exciting?
Oh, I like that question a lot. And I like how you said from the moment you start writing, you really are an author. So
Yeah.
it's kind of that struggle to
Mhm.
believe it yourself as well. But I think one of the like happy, not happiest, but maybe the most meaningful moments was the first time I ordered a book from like I self-published, but it wasn't on the market yet. It was just my draft copy with the title and the cover. And I ordered it from Barnes and Noble, and it was the first time I like had a physical copy of a book.
Hold
And
it.
yes, it was so meaningful, and I was it just it felt like so many years of work. Had
Yes.
gone into this, even though like all the writing I'd ever done was kind of like symbolized by this book. So that was really meaningful. And then also going to the writers conference and meeting people, that was really, really fun because I felt like I was part of the community now. And
Uh-huh.
I got to meet so many different genres and some of
Yeah.
my one of my favorite authors, Hugh wrote Paperboy was there, and so that was really fun.
Yes, I gave that
Yeah.
book to my son for Christmas just because I saw
Oh.
you had suggested that was one of the books that you had read and you enjoyed growing up, and I trusted your opinion by that point, and I was like, I am giving this to him for
Oh.
Christmas. So he signed it while we were there.
Oh,
So
good, good.
that
Yeah,
was
that's one of
exciting.
my favorites.
Yes,
But
that was really exciting. That's kind of how we felt too when my daughter published her picture book and she did the illustrations and everything. And it was like, wow, this is real when you're holding it in your hands. Yeah. What kind of story do you think you enjoy writing about the most? Like, what are you drawn to in terms of writing? Like, some people are very into fantasy or, science fiction, that kind of thing. What are you
yeah,
into?
that's a good question because I've kind of thought about that. I'm not really sure what you would call it, but um, I guess maybe whimsical stories. I like to do whimsical stories that are also deep,
Yeah.
which Dear Lucy doesn't really apply because it is so deep. It's
Mhm.
hard to kind of see the whimsy, but
No.
Um, I guess books that I would want to read when I was in middle school and high school, those are still my favorite books. So like anything that I would feel drawn to across genres, would normally be like very imaginative, but also kind of like heavy and deep at the same
Yeah.
time. So I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a genre.
No, I think that's great. I think was it C.S. Lewis that had said, you would probably know better than I would, that had said like any something about any children's book that an adult can enjoy.
Yes.
I
Mhm.
don't know the exact quote is a book worth reading. Like, so
Right.
it's kind of how I gathered the drive to be
Mhm.
something that kids could enjoy, but an
Yeah.
adult still really enjoys the story
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it because I think what you just said kind of encapsulates better what I'm kind of feeling like the things I like to write. I want it to be applicable both for adults and for kids, so it's accessible for both.
I also want to know, so how do you feel? Has anyone ever written a bad review or given you a bad comment? Or how do you handle, especially this day and age? I mean, it's so easy for somebody just to quick write something
Right. Mhm.
online. And I think, young people, teenagers, they get that a lot, and it can really just destroy their love of writing.
Right.
What would be good advice for them for dealing with something like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most of the time, I wouldn't necessarily suggest this for everyone because everyone's got different needs. I don't use social media very much, so I don't post um on social media, so there's not as many comments coming.
The blessing.
Which right, that's a blessing. There's negative sides to it, but that has been a blessing. But even if I receive comments that are said in love but are negative, I can still be kind of sensitive to those, and it can still feel like, oh, I'm not good enough or I didn't write well enough. I think even comments like that are said in love, like we said earlier, it's important to like see the truth in it and to know it's coming from a place of kindness and wanting you to improve. It doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It just means that you can get better, which every writer can get better. So
Mhm.
that was like a big lesson learning to say like, okay, I'm not a perfect writer,
Yeah,
especially when I was first starting. I'm like, I am the best, like really kind of arrogant. But when I was in middle school and high school, which part of it's good, like if God gives you confidence, it can help you be more risk-taking in your stories, but it's
true.
also good to like accept the feedback. And I had to be humbled by really kind family members who told me
Oh,
things throughout my career. Um,
it's
yeah.
a
But
career. It's a
yeah,
career.
yeah. I feel like I've just started, so I don't know if I can call it a career, but
Oh, no, I think when you're doing anything on the side like that, it sometimes doesn't feel like a career because you enjoy it so much.
yeah, that's a good
I
way to put it.
I don't know, but yeah, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way
Um,
to look at
what are you, so I have some more fun questions here. So what are you working on next? Are you able to give us an idea if you are working on anything or
it.
not? Or is it
Yeah,
secret?
no, that's a good question. So I can give a little bit of details. I'm not sure if it'll come to fruition because sometimes, like I said, like I work on something and it kind of feels like it's not right. But
Yeah.
um, so far it's been really fun. I've been working on a science fiction for like mostly teenagers.
Okay.
That's hopefully appropriate for middle school ages too, but
Mhm.
might have a little bit more like adventure and peril than
Okay.
the drive did. But I want to explore I've been reading a lot about the topic of like the Christian view of humanity and how, like, what does it mean to be human? And a lot of that, like, allegorical language can be talked about and like,
Mhm.
I don't know, just having like a larger view of how God made humans to be and how special we are because
Mhm.
are made in his image. I
Yeah.
don't know, there's just like this I read authors who put it much better, and it's as I've gotten older, I'm like, I kind of want to learn more what it's like to be human, and like a lot of authors that I've read who talk about this talk about how becoming more like Jesus, that's becoming more truly human because
Mhm.
um, the the rules and the things in the Bible that God tells us about are for our benefit. It's to make us more happy and flourishing like we were supposed to be.
Mhm.
So all of that kind of like running around in my mind, but something sci-fi.
Yeah.
Um,
But I
yeah,
can
so I
feel that C.S. Lewis,
mhm.
take on it.
Yeah,
How he was
yeah.
so good at that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like his perspective on that. So that's kind of vague, but something sci-fi, something maybe for older kids, but still in the middle school to teenage genre. Um,
Well, when you write, then do you give yourself deadlines? Like I know some authors are like, I have to write this many pages by this date, and I have a publication date of this to get it out. Or is it more just however it flows, and whenever it gets done, it gets done?
yeah, that's a good question. I have set deadlines in the past that were probably deadlines I should have met, especially once it was written, I needed to like edit and then copyright then publish.
Yeah.
And I always failed those deadlines. I was always like months after. But as far as like the writing process, it's normally just it comes really slowly and then sometimes it comes really quickly. There's not really a deadline.
Yeah.
Um, but I think for me, that's been more like of a natural way to write because I don't feel like I'm rushing myself.
Yeah.
But I also know some writers feel like they should have a deadline because it'll help them be more creative and just
Right.
get rid of that writer's block if they commit to
Mhm.
writing. So I think it's kind of like up to someone's personality. But
Personality. Do
yeah,
you
what about
write
yeah.
like in Word or do you write on a program or how do you do that?
Yeah, so I used to write in Microsoft Word and then I switched to Google Docs because I'd forget to save. So I would lose my writing. So now Google Docs will save it automatically. So I've kind of played around with those two, but
Oh,
nothing super fancy so far. But
see, you don't need super fancy kids. You just you don't. It seems like I think that's what drives a lot of teens away from even attempting this is it feels so out of reach.
right.
And it's really it's not.
Mhm.
I'll try to put some, like I said, some links and maybe that'll help some people.
Mhm.
But let's see. So what about in 5 years? Where do you think you see yourself as
Mhm.
an author?
Oh,
Or
I like that question. Ideally, I would like to have more books published. Like in a perfect world, I'd like to be like able to support myself with writing. I don't really feel like that's probably gonna happen. I would love for it to happen. That would be totally a God
yeah,
thing. He would have to work that out.
right.
But like ideally, what would probably happen is I hope I have more books published, whether or not that they're popular.
That's right.
I have so many ideas that I've always, it kind of feels like the right time to kind of get them out, especially I'm still in school, online, so
Okay.
it's a good way to relieve stress.
Yes.
Like having this as another component of my life is actually beneficial right now rather than more stressful. It helps relieve the stress.
And I tell kids too that even if nobody ever reads your book,
Mhm.
we'll take that as a legacy project with you when
Mhm.
you grow up one day, maybe get married, maybe have
Mhm.
children. You can pass it on to them. And I think about, I would have loved to know what my parents were thinking when they were, when they were teenagers writing books. And
Mhm.
um, I just think that would be a really neat thing to be able to pass on, or even to your grandchildren. So if you look at it from that aspect, I think a legacy project is amazing if that's
Mhm.
all it becomes, if there's nothing else.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a really good way to look at it because even just I have a couple of friends who are writers. One of them's published and one of them's hoping to be published, and they share their work, and I feel like I know them better as friends, and like it's really meaningful. So I
Yeah.
haven't reached the stage where like a family member's given it to me or I've given it to a family member, like to a child or a grandchild, but even just with friends, it's been so
Mhm.
meaningful.
If you could like step into any kind of fictional world for a day,
Mhm.
where would you go?
I love this question. This might be too predictable, but I'd go to Narnia for
Yeah.
sure. I would love Narnia,
Yes.
especially from Prince Caspian. Like that era of Narnia was my favorite. So,
Hey.
um, after all the bad stuff gets resolved,
Right.
like the good part of that
Everything
book.
happy. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
If you could have lunch with any author, whether, from the past, or living today, who would that be? Why?
Oh, that's really hard. I have so many. I think I would probably choose Nancy Rue just because I loved her books so much and I read like every one I could find. So,
Okay. That
and yeah, I respect her writing style. She actually has a book on writing for middle
oh,
school to teenagers, so I read that.
okay.
I can send you a link if you want, but
Yeah, that would be
um,
great. I can put that
so I
down.
yeah, I kind of feel like I've talked to her before because she wrote it in a letter format. People would send her letters and she wrote back answers. So I'm
Oh,
like, what would it be like if I actually got to ask her some like specific questions? But
that's a
yeah,
great way to teach somebody that.
yes, yes, I agree.
What's one fun fact about yourself?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's okay. This is like kind of a silly fact, but I love plants and I love gardening, but they always die. So I'm constantly buying new plants, and trying to nurture the ones that are slowly dying. So it's just really silly, but
Funny.
my screen's blurred, but I've got like this plant back here it's I think it's a wax plant, something wax leaf plant, so it's almost indestructible, so it's still alive. But
Oh, nice.
so
That's
I have a black thumb, but I love plants. So
well, it kind of sounds like me too. I actually looked into buying a bunch of fake plants
yes,
because
yes.
I love the way they look, but yeah,
Mhm.
I just can't get them to grow for longer than a couple of weeks. So,
Yeah, I'm a supporter of fake plants. They make it look like you're really good at gardening, but you still
yes.
get the flowers.
Exactly. Exactly. Let me see. If maybe I'll ask this question. If your books were turned into movies,
Oh,
who would you cast as main characters?
I love that question because I've thought about this just for fun before. I think for Dear Lucy, for the mom and dad, I would cast John Krasinski and Emily Blunt because they're married in real life, and I don't know much about their personal lives, but I've seen them act together, and like they kind of fit the character
Yeah,
types that I have in the book. Um,
it's
and
funny. That's
then
all I'm going to see now if I, to go to read it.
right, right. I think it's the beard, especially John Krasinski, like grew out his beard. But and then for the drive, I think I'd have Tom Hanks play Signore Gian because I just love Tom Hanks. He wouldn't even have to have an Italian accent. He could just be in the
Right.
movie. So
That
that's
would
mostly I love Tom Hanks, but
that would be good. Well, is there anything else um, that you want to share with other young authors or aspiring to be authors that middle grades, teenagers, um, something that you could leave for them?
yeah, that's a good question. I think something that I feel like God's taught me and I wish I had learned earlier is just to really enjoy the writing process, which we've talked and you've mentioned is so important, and it really is because I think we can be like our own like worst critic or however the phrase goes, and I would just feel like I'm never gonna be professional or I'm never gonna sound like this other author that I love. But over time, I realized a lot of the benefits from writing was actually like the lessons God was teaching me and just being free to be imaginative and creative for no
Mhm.
purpose whatsoever. Like it didn't have to
Sure.
be productive.
Right.
It could just be fun. And then an author once told me his advice was to write what you're passionate about, which you also mentioned. And I think that has been like the biggest key in like loving what I'm writing is I'm not writing for what I think other people. I mean, I want to keep my audience in mind, but I want to write what I think the Lord's leading me to write and what I love.
I hope that was encouraging, especially if you're just getting started out. I will put Joy's website down in the links, along with some other links that'll help you just to get started on your self publishing journey. And if you have any questions for her or for me, yeah, put those below, and hopefully we can help you along the way. And thanks for watching.